Hi, very good morning to you. It's Jim from maverickstar Observatory. In this upload, I wanted to talk about the psychology of an actual pole reversal on the planet and delve a little bit. We're not going to open too many cans of worms because, believe me, we really can here. But delve a little bit into, what is perceived will happen during a pole shift, what some people might think is going to take place, and what are some of the realities that over the last 10 years we've been studying, the effects of what we see as directly happened will be the case in this video. So before we do, I have to give a huge thank you to Philip, who's one of our continuous supporters of the observatory, and also Kevin, and without mentioning all the names, just a couple of others, big thanks for your support. When I get a little bit of support for the observatory, I'll become a little bit more optimistic, and I feel like what we're doing is slowly crawling towards the objective that we want to achieve, and that is become more informative on one of the rarest anomalies that is taking place in humanity, which is massively going unheard of. So if I can just say big thanks to Philip, Kevin the other day, who I forgot to mention, and I apologise for that. Big thanks, and for anyone else that wants to support the observatory, big thanks to our patrons. Please never forget the fact that I am very grateful for the support you give us, and in turn, it enables us to give something back. I hope that you definitely feel that if you've put something into this observatory, that you've got something back out. So let's talk about the psychology of the pole shift. So what do people generally think is going to happen? I think before we even ask that question, what we need to know is really how many people are aware of the Earth going through such a massive change that could have so many implications on the future of everybody's life on this planet. It could also have massive implications to the survivability of the biodiversity across the range. And what I'm going to put that in simple terms is, if things go horribly wrong, as they have done, as we've seen on other planets in our solar system, then all life on Earth is diminished from that point. So to answer the question is very simple. Around 98% or even more than that don't even know that the Earth is going through a magnetic pole reversal. And then we've got the 2%, which probably makes up the majority of our subscribers that are aware of it and know some of the implications. And then we've also got a very small percentage of that 2% that believe it could be just a minor event. As NASA have come out themselves and disclosed, they said with regards to this event, we're not going to make too many comments on it. We don't want to cause too much alarmism because it could be a simple event where the compass needle reverses and there's not too many effects after that, or it could be quite a catastrophe. And because there is that uncertainty, they're not prepared to make any announcements, and I think that's why they're shy in informing people more than what they do on this topic, because it could go easily either way. Trying to break it down a little bit more, we do have a lot of people that think it's just going to be a case of the compass needle reversing, but then there is the information that we've managed to draw out of the 10 years that we've been operating as an observatory. Let's say officially as an observatory over the last 5 years, since we developed the TriMag system and actually started to observe things scientifically. Alongside the data that we've collected, which has been really thorough. People have questioned the resolution that we monitor the magnetic North Pole because they're saying it's almost like watching paint dry. But okay, if there's a massive event, and the resolution obviously is at every 3 seconds we take a reading of the magnetic North Pole from one of 3 tracks on the TriMag system. That's obviously where it gets its name from. We have then a record as clean and crisp as anyone could probably wished for, that wanted to study something that just took place if it was a major event. We've got that data, and we've got probably now coming up 3 years worth of the data at that resolution. So that is really a massive achievement by our observatory. That's where I think we're separated from anything else. We have that resolution, that quantity of data, and if you look at the TriMag data on the website, you'll see that every month there's almost nearly 500,000 readings taken in just 1 month. And these readings are took 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Now, can you just think about that for a minute? That's the marvel of having technology. We could never personally sit there every 3 seconds and write down the next chapter of the pole migration, but it's very easy when you use technology and electronics to capture that information for you. And then if we need to, zoom in on that resolution and see each individual heartbeat, single heartbeat of what happened during the event when it happens. But we've got already a large amount of data leading up to that event. And there are some theories that we've built on which suggest we could see something happen quite soon. Because there is a bit of a mystery out there with some of these organisations as to actually when the poles will reverse. Well, we are clearly in a reversal period right now, but I think what they're expecting to be the pinnacle event is actually when the compass needle flicks from north to south, as it has done before 780,000 years ago, quite regularly every 300,000 years on a cyclical interval. So there is the other aspect as well. We know that the diminished magnetosphere that continues gradually to weaken, and we're measuring in microteslas. If we was measuring perhaps in something smaller than nanoteslas, we would have an indication of how it was actually depleting. Maybe that's something we can look at as an observatory in the future, because then we actually see on the small microscale how things are diminishing, and they are diminishing. We know that we're around about 15 to 20% down on the average magnetosphere protection, and as a result of that we've got an increase in effects, because this magnetosphere is actually what protects all the biodiversity, keeps it alive on the planet, and 20% is a big chunk of it if it's removed, and it has been already. So what would be the actual physical effects of that? Well, we know that a weakened magnetosphere allows more cosmic radiation into into the atmosphere. First of all, it collides with a lot of other things, smashing into small particles, but in turn it's an increase in radiation inbound, even at surface level. We know this is directly noticed on things like the ISS, the International Space Station, and we do suspect that at some point when we get our equipment into Brazil, and we will do, it's a very difficult task, we've been trying for a couple of years, but we will eventually find a reliable source where we can send out a muon detector and a magnetometer and just monitor one of the weakest spots on our planet for how much inbound radiation is there, and then we can compare that to the level of danger that poses. But we do know that over the last 100 years, the magnetosphere has weakened to the point where it's lost 20%. So that would then tell us then if we're receiving more radiation, we are also going to see a spike in cancer rates increasing. And we can open again a big can of worms here. You can say, well, okay, population has increased over the last 30 years. We need to take an average of that. We need to take an average of the increasing cancer rates, and over the time period again of 30 years, we need to take an we need to take an average of how much extra radiation that we've had inbound to answer that question as to has increased cancer rates become more prominent now over the last 30 years, directly related to the magnetosphere. Or there's just that, like I say, we could open up a massive can of worms there. We could find the question and the answer. Sorry, we could find the answers in that route of exploratory, by taking those averages. Or we could just simply say that we know from study radiation increase leads to an increase in cancer rates, and you just from that point on accept the fact that it is related to that. It's not just cancer rates that we know that cosmic radiation affects, it's also cardiac arrhythmias. So by added radiation, let's call it that, we're going to see an increase in heart attacks and cardiac failure as a result of the increase in radiation due to the poles reversing. And we think it just affects human beings. It's not the case. This affects all biodiversity, so all animals will be affected by the increased levels of radiation due to the fact that this Earth's going into reversal. This is why I can't emphasize the importance about the reversal, about that this is one of these anomalies that has now turned up on our doorstep in our lifetimes, and this is something that we're going to have to deal with, because the majority of people, the 98% out there, are completely unaware of this. And it might be some of their relatives and family members that get affected directly by that increase in radiation, and the low level of protection that will gradually increase over time. So this is why I say it's so important. There's no point really, if you're concentrating on something that's really important to you in your life, to worry about earthquakes, because earthquakes are common. They happen frequently at different magnitudes. Some of them are very serious, some of them take life away, and yes, it is a concern if you're caught up in that. But it's the same for volcanic eruptions. We've not lived on this earth without volcanic eruptions. I know it's very negative for people caught up in a vicinity of a volcano, but for me as a scientist, it is a good example of an active core in the planet, and that together with a regular reversing magnetic pole is also a good sign. But the worrying part about this time round, it's been 500,000 years delayed, and of course the concern warning light comes on as a result of that delay. Only because we know that if we compare our planet, which is what you have to do in science, you have to have some comparisons. If we compare Mars with our planet, we see that Mars had an atmosphere, had a magnetosphere, had water on its atmosphere, actually had an atmosphere, but when it lost its magnetosphere as a result of the, first of all, volcanoes stop erupting, the secondly of probably a solidification of the core which shut down the magnetosphere, you start to then question, if it happened there, could it quite possibly happen here? And the answer is absolutely yes, it could. And therefore, you express more concern on that warning light of the delay of 500,000 years on average that the poles should have reversed within. So, it is, from a scientific point of view, from my point of view, a really concerning time that we're living in. And it is largely going unheard of. You put CO2 levels, they're talking about, we need to reduce CO2, we need to keep this down to zero. Our net output of CO2 should be zero by 2030 or 2040. When you put that in comparison to the Earth going for a magnetic reversal, it's insignificant. I want to just say CO2 in the atmosphere makes up less than 0.4% in any case. So it's an insignificant thing to focus on. Yet, as a species, globally, that is what we're doing now. And I think there is, I understand that when you pump in, like we have as human beings, many gigatons of carbon into the atmosphere, as we has done, and people will say, well, okay, you put that many gigatons of anything into something, it can't be a good idea. I completely agree with that, but when you look at the terms of what CO2 does and the danger aspects of it, you know what, it's insignificant. It really is. NASA have took photos of deserts going green as a result of a slight increase in CO2. Is that a bad thing? For species on this planet, it creates an environment and habitat, so it's not a bad thing that we've put that extra CO2 in there, and it's done that to Sahara deserts and other deserts around the world. What is of concern and more important is the magnetic pole shift. There's nothing you can do about an event that could destroy everything living on the planet if it takes a certain direction. There is something you can do about active volcanoes. You can bide it out. Eventually the eruptions will subside, and you deal with the consequences after. If the magnetosphere shuts down of the Earth, there is no consequences to deal with after that point, because biodiversity across the world has been lost. So there is the issue of where our priorities are right now as a species, as to what we should be concerned about. And for 10 years I've known about this and tried to express the importance to other people out there as well, that this is a massive game changer, unlike anything humanity has ever witnessed, lived through or saw. And right now we are experiencing those changes take place. We have seen the changes and modifications to jet streams alone, which has caused a lot of trouble for commercial farmers, and is causing trouble on an individual level to a lot of us. Yet the majority of the people on this planet are unaware what really is the cause of this. We have spent millions and millions, in fact billions of pounds on a lot of the things that were not important. Climate and CO2 related expenditure with regards to the taxpayer is now increasing, because now it's being classed as something that needs to be dealt with globally, and is in now policies of most westernized governments as well as eastern governments now. So we're putting our eggs in the wrong basket, and the only way we can change any of this is by making more awareness of what we are actually living through in as far as crises that could possibly happen in the future. We have to make more people aware of that crisis, and we also have to try and protect ourselves against it and some of the implications, and there's been no work done at all on that level to date, because simply this has not been accepted as something as important as the mere CO2 that we're putting onto our atmosphere, which is really shocking from a scientific point of view, and somebody that is, I like to consider myself, a logical thinker, someone that weighs up all the options that I've managed to understand, and sort of like portray those. That's where we are. We're in a massive crisis because of the failure to actually understand what is going to take place, what we know we've already learned, and the fact that the majority of the population on this planet are completely unaware of it. And this is no tin hat foil conspiracy thing. This is accepted by all the other organisations that this is actually taking place, and that even those organisations are unsure of the possible consequences, and they have outlined both the case where we shouldn't be so concerned, but they've also highlighted, and they've done it themselves. You can research this on YouTube. I did have a video that was done by Nova on the website that clearly identified the risks that we face. And then we have the evidence of what has happened to one of our neighbour planets when these things go terribly, terribly wrong. And this is something that we really need to start working on, not just collecting the data, but also increasing the awareness of the actual situation that we are in right now. It's really, really, really important, guys. that we do that. 98% of the population are completely unaware of what times they're living in, and with regards to this anomaly that's taking place, and that is completely unacceptable. I think you would agree with me. And then even the 2% that are aware are confused as to what will be the case when it happens. We need to start clearing up all these areas, and that is something I'm going to put a bit of time into this year, in trying to first of all increase the awareness. I'm asking you guys, not just to physically, try and help with a bit of finances for us, because without those we cannot physically exist, but also go that a little bit further by trying to spread the awareness on your Facebook pages, on your Instagram pages. You don't have to come across like a tin hat crazy person, coming out with a conspiracy. You can just subtly mention it. I think that's always the best way to, bring a new concept over to somebody. But it needs to happen, because, if we're going to focus on CO2 and put all our eggs in that basket, we are leading ourselves down a road which is not going to be very proactive for us. What we need to do is really some of the major issues that we're facing on this planet. I just want to talk about CO2. I mean, just briefly, I was thinking about this the other day. I thought it's important to mention this. With regards to CO2, more research needs to be done on that. If you want to really consider that, and this is like, more research needs to be done on it in the concept of, okay, what has cleared up CO2 considerably in our past, and that's ocean life forms, such as I was going to say chem and water troughs, but that's not correct, because those are more found around deep ocean volcanic vents, but more along the lines, let's just say microorganisms that absorb the CO2. There are billions in our oceans, but if we are poisoning our oceans with plastic and fishing equipment, which, through watching a recent documentary, Sea Spray I think it was, we find that 47% of the pollution of plastic in our oceans is through fishing equipment, fishing nets, lines, things like that. And then there's the, all the other stuff that makes up that plastic. But if that is poisoning our oceans, it might be poisoning the organisations that clear out the CO2, and that could also lead to a rise in CO2 if the organisms are being poisoned as a result of that. And we know we're poisoning the fish, and we're destroying the nursery grounds as a result of this pollution that we are responsible for. But we should also be looking at other aspects of natural scrubbers of CO2 out the atmosphere, and I don't even think somebody's even considered this. Has there been a decline in the species which is majority responsible for cleaning up the CO2 in our atmosphere? And is that because of the pollution in the oceans that we've put there? There are a lot of questions. If you really want to tackle climate and CO2 and things like that, if that's what you believe, then I think you should be doing that research. And again, I've not come across any that has looked at that aspect, which links CO2 with the ocean pollution. So those are the I just wonder, who are the scientific advisors of these governments, really, when they are not coming up with ideas to actually address some answers. The problem is that the more we start, it is the same with everything, and it's one of the reasons why, out of all the sciences, I studied natural sciences, chemistry, biology, physics and all that, but one of the ones that I didn't really like was physics, because it can always pose an opposition to something that you've got on the table. Something that you've got a firm belief in, it can always pose an opposition to that. And not only that, some of the laws of physics are, as we're starting to see now, not be permanent laws, because there are times where those laws can be overcome by certain circumstances. So for me, physics was a pain in the arse, although I do like the practical application of physics. So little diversion there. The main thing is we've got two things that we need to do at this observatory: create more awareness of what is taking place, and we need to also investigate at some point what can we do to protect ourselves during you know, some of the consequences of being in a pole reversal. You know, what can be done to protect people against harm, against the cancer that can be caused as a result of the radiation, what can be done to protect people about cardiac arrhythmias, and not just human beings, but what can we do as a species with a certain level of technology do to protect our world. I think it's a good point, a good part of this video to end it here, because I think I've provoked a lot of thought, and you know, that's what I want to do. You know, I also mentioned that you know, if you want to help support what we do, and we've got a massive job here, we haven't even touched the surface of it, you know, but if we can get more funding, you know, we can start real campaigns, you know, to bring the awareness of this situation. But that starts with funding and like-minded people coming together, understanding that something needs to be done. You know, we can't just sit here as individuals with some of the knowledge of some of these events and not do nothing about it. You know, we have to bring this out so that more people are aware of it, and then maybe something can be done about it. But before we even get there, you know, we need to start at grassroots, which is where we are. We do have equipment out there in the field, and we are monitoring scientifically, you know, the effects of this. But there is also another side to this. You know, we need to get it out there so that people can understand exactly what is going on and why they need to know that. So there's a link down there if you want to help support our observatory. Big thanks again to Phil, Kevin, Margaret the other day that, you know, pledged some support for us. You know, that helps us push this cart forward. So I'll say what I usually do. You know, take care of your loved ones as always. Bye for now.